and welcome to another exciting episode of the 100 Days of Growth with me. Today, we're going to be looking at another exciting topic on how JavaScript handles your functions when you bind them to the onclick handler. Now, this is quite very tricky because the behavior is quite different when you work with vanilla JS, especially when you are using, your onclick in your HTML directly, and when you use it differently with JSX, especially with React, and maybe when you use it with Vue or Angular, because the behavior is all different. But we're going to understand like the foundation and how it behaves. So let's define a button here, and let's call this click me, and then let's define an onclick method here and say handle click, and we are going to add the parentheses here. So for when we work with HTML, right? So when you're adding the functions, when you're adding functions to HTML, you are allowed to pass the parentheses directly. Why? Because this is wrapped in strings. So because it is wrapped in strings, it will not automatically fire or trigger the function. What this means is that you are passing a reference of the function to the onclick handler, and whenever you call the onclick handler, it fires the function. So if we go to our JavaScript now and we define this function in our JavaScript, you see that when we can say click me. So if we come to our HTML, you see click me. When we click on it, you should see click me. So it fires when we run it. But now this is going to, you notice that this is going to, if we take away this on click and we give this and we try to access this this button on our JavaScript directly, you say button equal to query select document dot query selector, and then we fetch button. Right now, if we say button dot on click, we can call the onclick method directly on button, and we pass the parentheses at this point. This is going to fire immediately. Why? Because this is different from what we had in our HTML. In our HTML, it was wrapped in string, sorry, but this time around it's no longer wrapped in string. So what this is doing is that we are invoking the function directly. We're not passing a reference of the function to the onclick. So if we come to our index.html and we refresh it, you see it fires immediately. Click me. Why does it behave that way? Because in HTML, like I said, we passed in the curly brackets in string. So because we pass it in string, it does not fire immediately. It takes it as a reference of the function. But in your JSX, in your JSX and in JS, you cannot pass in the parentheses directly. Rather, you have to take off these parentheses and assign a reference of the function to the onclick, so that when you click on it, so if we clear the console again and we refresh, you see that nothing shows, and then when we click on the click me, it fires. So what this means is that when you're working in JavaScript, only assign the reference of the function to the onclick handler, but when you're working in your HTML, you can pass it directly. This is the difference you need to understand. One passes the reference of the function without the curly brackets, the other passes it with strings. Why? Because strings, cancels out that invocation call immediately. Now, another thing you also need to understand is that when you, for instance, let's look at JSX example. You have, let's say for instance, you have with JSX, this is something that may not work here. It's going to throw error, but let's just see. So you have a button, and then you have on click, and then you are assigning it. So with JSX, you can either pass in the handle click directly like this, and you can either pass in the handle click directly like this, or you can pass in an arrow function, right? An arrow function that wraps handle click like this, and either of them is the same. Why? Because the arrow function is just a callback, right, that wraps the function, and it's not going to fire until it is instantiated, or until this on click is triggered. So basically they are like both the same thing, which is like saying it has a reference to the function, and until it is called, the function is not going to run. So this is what you need to really understand on how JavaScript handles your function calls, especially when you are attaching it to the onclick handler. And this works basically for every type of event, maybe for onclick, for on hover. You need to understand this because this is something that can really be confusing on how JavaScript calls your function. So once you understand this, you're able to clear the whole confusion, and you can easily predict when and where your function would run and where and when your function would not run. So I hope you're able to learn something. Thank you for joining me today. If you've not subscribed to my channel yet, do well to subscribe to my channel. Drop a like, drop a comment if you learned something, and share this to your friend. Also, don't forget to turn on your notification bell so that you get notified whenever I post videos like this. Thank you and see you tomorrow. Bye.